Okay. Hey, everybody. Say hi.
Hey everybody, what's going on?
Everybody knows who you are, but for those that don't know, this is my lovely boyfriend slash baby daddy, which he hates that term, but this is Richard.
No baby.
This is Richard, and so we're coming on here today because earlier this morning I made a post, and just to be transparent, we took these pictures like a couple of days ago, and I typically plan out my Instagram feed. So I planned all of these pictures, like I planned 1, 2, 3, and I uploaded them into my planner at the same time, and I had captions for all 3 of them like 3 days ago. Well, when it came time today for me to post this one, which is the picture of me and Richard, the caption that I had planned from 3 days ago, I just wasn't feeling it anymore. You get what I'm saying? Like I wanted it to be something that resonated with me in that moment. And I looked at this picture and I laughed because remember we argued like right before we took this picture. So I looked at it and I was like, wow, this is such a beautiful picture. And it's like depicting the love that we have for each other, which is, you know, still valid. But it was just people would never look at this picture and think that we just argued right before it. Right. So I just used it as an opportunity to just be real. Like, yes, this is a pretty picture. Yes, this is the man I love. But shit, we struggle, you know, we have communication issues. And so I made the post, and if you didn't read it, it says, can I be honest with y'all? We both, sorry, I can't read. Can I be honest with y'all? We bought in the first day of the new year with the petty argument. And y'all know how petty arguments are. One thing leads to another, and before you know it, you have a whole blow up about something so trivial. As a matter of fact, we argued right before we took this picture. Shame on us. Over the years, we've been able to overcome a hell of a lot of barriers in our relationship, but the one thing that we have not been able to master is communication. I'm not a submissive woman by nature, and Richard loves my strength, but he is also not a man that's going to go for a woman that thinks she's going to wear the pants every day, all day. If you know Richard, you know he ain't going for it. At the end of the day, we still struggle. In the latest conversation we had about our goals, individually and as a unit, I had to remind myself of just that. We are a unit. We are a team. Even when we're at odds, our goal is the same, and that is to win together. And I just said, I have to remind myself that this man goes harder for me sometimes than I go for myself, and that I'm going to, and vice versa, and that I'm going to give him some grace and learn how to shut the hell up sometimes. Think I can do that?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, baby, that's fine. And then I just said, sisters, help me. How do you maintain your voice in the relationship while still allowing your man to be the man? And I got 150 comments, like 200 shares, a bunch of saves, people sharing it to their stories. And we got a lot of feedback. So I wanted to first ask you, what is, I guess, submission to you, and why is it important for you in the relationship?
I really wouldn't call it submission. I would call it, I really don't have a word for it. I take that back, what I would call it. I think that a man should be able to speak his mind in a way where it doesn't offend the woman, and her be able to take it in and not necessarily have to speak back if it's unnecessary. I think that with me and you, you being the alpha female that you are, the Taurus that you are, when you don't necessarily agree with what I say, you have to speak back on it. And with 2 Tauruses, living in the same area, and it bumps heads a lot. And I think that's where our problem lies. We're by nature just what's the word that you like to use all the time?
I don't know. Bullheaded.
Bullheaded, yeah.
Outspoken, stubborn.
Yeah, so
loving, loyal.
All those parts factor in. So I don't want to say I want a person want her to be submissive. I want her to be able to just listen without necessarily having to respond. And sometimes that doesn't happen because she doesn't necessarily agree with what I might say, which she's perfectly fine in doing that. But sometimes everything doesn't have to be responded to. And I guess that's where the bumping head comes in.
Okay. So I would say a majority of our arguments are because neither of us will shut up, right? Majority. And you feel, and correct me if I'm wrong, like I need to learn how to be the person to shut up. I don't want to say shut up like shut up, but like learn how to be the person to be like, okay, you know what, I'm gonna let you have it because you're the man.
Not necessarily because I'm the man, because sometimes a person just needs to say what they need to say, and not necessarily need a response. So it's not necessarily about being the man, or wearing the pants, or any of that stuff that people call it. Just sometimes need to be heard and don't necessarily need a response. I think that's fair for me to put it that way.
I feel like you're being very politically correct.
I'm not trying to be. I'm trying to be as natural as possible with this, because it's a very good topic to talk about. Because communication is very important. If you don't have it, I think there's going to be a lot of conflict within the household or relationship just in general.
Okay, so if you're just being completely honest, what grinds your gears about me as it relates to communication, when we argue, submission or lack thereof? Like, what do you think I contribute to the problem? And you can be completely honest, because you're being like very
What you contribute to the
regal.
problem is responding when it's unnecessary. When I just need to be heard.
Okay, baby, 1 second. Sorry, y'all.
When I just need to be heard and don't need a response. I don't need a response of whether you agree with or whether you don't agree with, because I'll ask you whether you agree with or don't agree with. So if I'm not asking one of those, whatever one that is, sometimes I just need you to be quiet and just hear what I'm saying, without us having to, tit for tat, go back and forth, and you have to be heard, I have to be heard, and it never dies out, and then you have tension in the house after that. You have tension going on because one feels like they weren't able to be heard the way they want to be heard, and I think it's not necessary all the time for both people to be heard. It's not necessary. But the submission thing is a very fine line, if that's the word. Yeah, that's what I call it. It's a very fine line right there with submission and just letting a person say what they need to say, and getting it off their chest and just hear me out.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
It does. I still feel like you're like.
No, that's how it is for me. It really is that. I don't need you to be submissive, because some people, I think, you have some people who are submissive to a point to where they're being a fool, I would call it. Those are my words. Those, don't quote me on that, but you don't want, myself, can't deal with a weak woman. A weak woman.
But weak doesn't mean submissive, though.
Right, it doesn't. That's why I don't like the word submissive. That's my point with the word.
Because you can't differentiate between the two of them.
Right. For me.
Okay.
I think the submissive thing can be taken out of context sometimes. So that's why I just say that kind of lost the words right this minute, because.
Okay, so open up the phone. Okay. So this is the comment that stood out to him, of course, and it says, mind you, she's probably one of 2 or 3 women that had a stance sort of like this, but one said, I might be the minority on this one, but I don't believe in submitting. We've been married 6 years and we just treat each other like human beings and respect each other's strengths and weaknesses. I respect him as a man, but I don't yield to his authority. We're equals as far as superiority. Sometimes I'm the voice of reason and sometimes his way is the better choice. I back down and be quiet only because he's the better lead for a particular situation, not just because he's a man. How do you feel about that?
Some of the words that she's using, I don't agree with. The authority thing and stuff like that. I don't agree with that. See, I read that comment before I started this, and I shouldn't have, because that kind of put me in that talking about submission and all that type of stuff. I think relationships need to be fluid.
So she's saying she backs down and she's quiet in certain situations, not because this is the man, but because you were just right in this particular situation. It has nothing to do with gender. Do you agree with that?
I do agree with that. I agree with that. And then, like, it goes back to what I was saying. It's not necessarily about being right or wrong. Sometimes the man just wants to be heard.
Okay.
He just wants to be heard without necessarily any reaction of as far as a backlash of how he's feeling, whether it's right or wrong in her eyes.
Okay.
So,
This response said, this is going to be long. Sorry. 2 of the things I work with my clients in as it relates to communication is 1, understanding the difference between impact and intent. They are not equal and often a big source of contention and miscommunication. Think, you're pretty for a dark-skinned girl. The intent may have been a genuine compliment, whereas the impact was negative. Yes. So when I thought that was a really good point. Mm-hmm. So she said, when you are communicating, or I don't want to say arguing, but when you're communicating, think about intent and impact, because they're 2 very different things. Mm-hmm. And then the second thing she said was, instead of saying the other thing she said is how to use I statements. Instead of saying, you hurt my feelings and you're disrespectful, then you should say, I feel really hurt and disrespected by that comment. So I'm still saying the same thing, but instead of making it about you, I'm making it about how you made me feel, and that might make you be more inclined to see things from my perspective.
I think you're pretty much saying the same thing. It's just being worded differently.
So you don't think it changes the impact?
The narrative is the same.
Well, yeah, she's saying the narrative is the same, but does that change the feeling of it? Instead of me saying, Richard, you're so disrespectful, and then saying, Richard, I feel really disrespected about what you said.
It's the same thing.
So you don't feel it's like it's no difference?
I feel it's the same.
Okay. Another thing that you have done often is like, if I've done something that you don't like, or said something or acted in a way that you don't like, and you'll like pull me to the side. So is there different expectations when we're in front of other company? Like when we're in front of people, how we communicate with each other?
I think absolutely, because when you're by yourself, that's more intimate. You can be more open as to how you communicate with each other. When you're around people, there's a difference. And I think everyone should be able to agree with me on that. There's definitely a difference.
So what should be handled differently?
It could be the tone. It could be, I think it starts with the tone. The tone doesn't necessarily have to be in that order, just my thoughts. The tone is where it begins for me. Just the whole spectrum of it. You need to handle your communication differently when you're around people than when you're in an intimate, just one-on-one.
Okay. This lady said, lately you've been tapping into being more vulnerable, and it brings tears to my eyes each and every time. I wasn't always outspoken, so my husband got used to the sheepish version of me, and he hadn't become fully equipped with the newer version of me, who doesn't let you talk to her any old kind of way. It's a daily struggle, but we love each other hard, and we're not afraid of going to counseling, which has helped tremendously. I'm so glad I read that. Counseling. So when I first mentioned counseling to you, you were not really on board with it. Not because, why weren't you on board with it? I want to speak for you.
I wasn't on board with it because I didn't feel the need necessarily for a mediator in between. Someone telling me that this is how a relationship needs to be, and all those things that they do, that the counselors, try to help you with. But as time went on, as I've matured in this relationship, I'm able to understand how a mediator is necessary if you're really trying to repair your thing. Because if you're not able to communicate back and forth, sometimes that need for a mediator to be able to say, look, you stop, let's go one at a time. Because sometimes you can't do that just between the two of you.
Okay. So what are your thoughts on couples counseling or like marriage therapy? Like now, are you yay, nay, or indifferent?
I think it's good to have somebody as a mediator, not necessarily a counselor, but it could be a good friend that both of you trust. Someone who can say, look, be quiet. The one who's, trying to take over the conversation, you be quiet for a minute, let her speak, or you be quiet for a minute, let him speak. Just someone who can mediate the conversation. That's what I believe.
So it could be a therapist.
It could be a therapist. It could be. Mm-hmm.
So what were your thoughts? We did therapy. We had 1 session, 2 sessions or 1? Well, 2 because we had 1 in person
and 1 on the phone.
Mm-hmm. So we did 1 Skype session with Todd and Ingrid. If you guys are looking at this, hello. And I thought it was awesome. Mm-hmm. And then they came to Atlanta, and we actually did an in-person session with them, and I think it was good to be able to, like you said, put everything out on the table, knowing that he can't interrupt me and I can't interrupt him. And it really allowed for us to hear what the other person was saying, because I think what Richard used to do a lot, which I've adapted sadly, is listening to respond instead of listening to understand. So it's like whenever he had a point to make, I'm already thinking of my rebuttal. That's the attorney in me, y'all. I was supposed to be an attorney. I don't know what happened. But why are you looking at me like that?
You beautiful.
Babe.
It's the truth.
Thank you. Oh, yeah. You go.
You're so funny. My word for that is instead of a person being proactive, they're being reactive. Like she said, just waiting to react to what is being said. Instead of hearing it, sitting down, taking it in, absorbing it, and then letting that person finish what they're saying and then responding. Whether you agree with it or whether you don't, you're giving that person an opportunity to say what's on their mind and what they feel. Like Courtney said, I think that I rubbed off on her in a bad way because I've always been a person who always would cut a person off when they're speaking, all that type of stuff, because I want to be heard. I'm not that alpha male, forgive me, but always want to be heard. My point needs to be taken first, and what you have to say can come second. I think as I've grown and I've matured, it's gotten better. I'm not 100%. God is still working on me. So, I think it's very important to be proactive instead of reactive when it comes to a relationship and communication.
What else? Do we have any advice? I mean, I guess we can't give advice because we're still trying to figure it out as well. But if I could offer any nuggets, and you can take it or leave it, I would say, like Richard just said, to be proactive and schedule. Like, I won't use the word schedule. That's what Richard hates about me. He thinks I'm too strategic. Set aside time to have check-ins with your mate, right? Like I explained to Richard, because when I initially mentioned the idea of like us having like relationship check-ins, he felt like I was overcomplicating it, right?
Yes.
Like it didn't. You felt like what?
Yeah, I felt like that it wasn't allowing it to just be fluid. But sometimes it's necessary. After I thought about it, it makes a lot of sense. Okay.
Yeah. No, I was just kind of comparing it to like when you're working at a job, you have a working relationship with your director or your peers, and you have an annual review, or sometimes two reviews a year. I don't know. I have an annual one, but that's an opportunity for my director to talk to me about, this is what's going great. This is what you're doing that I love. Maybe these are some areas of improvement. And I think we sometimes forget that relationships are relationships, regardless of whether it's your husband, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your cousin, your friend, your boss. Like, it's a relationship, and relationships take work. And I think my piece of advice is to make time to check in with your partner and see what are they doing that you love, and then what are they doing that you can change. And I think that will kind of help to keep things on the same page. And then when it comes to communication, a lot of y'all said, like, if it's not gonna matter maybe even 5 minutes from now, 5 hours, 5 days, let it go. Somebody said, weigh the cost analysis of it. She's an attorney. It was such a good comment too. But basically saying, like, if it's not going to bring you any type of resolution, and you're just arguing just for the sake of arguing, just let it go. And she was just saying, how her and her man are both very like alpha, but they make it work because she assesses, is this worth, I don't know how she put it, but it was good, y'all. Go look through the comments. So my takeaways are: schedule check-ins with your partner, determine if it's worth it, and then just shut the hell up, ladies, sometimes. And that's, it's me, I'm talking to myself. So yeah, those are I don't like to say advice because, y'all, I'm not a professional at this, but that's what I would say. What would you say for the fellas that's dealing with a whole lot of women like this?
But I would say to the fellas and the ladies that you can't worry about how another person's relationship looks. You have to look at your own and work your relationship the way it works for you, instead of looking at the outside of another person's relationship and thinking that that's how you want to be. You just have to, because you don't know what's going on in that household or in that relationship, to make that thing work for them. I think everybody's an individual, and it takes those two individuals to make that one relationship work under what it is, that soup that they have to put together for them. And that would be my take.
Okay. That's it.
All right.
I think IGTV is supposed to be 10 minutes long, and this is definitely more than 10 minutes, so this might have to be 2 videos, y'all. But if that's all, we're done.
All right.
Thank you.
All right.